go ahead and pass it on to Elliot first.
Hi, my name is Elliot Guinness. I am a junior and I go to Northfield High School.
Thank you, Elliot. Let's go and pass it on to Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley Buddy. I go to Northfield and I'm a junior as well.
Thank you. Jayla?
I'm a senior at Northfield High School. My name is Jayla Hemphill. I'm a student board representative for the school.
Thank you. Angel?
Hi, I'm Angel. I'm a senior at East High School, and I'm also a student board representative.
Awesome. Thank you, Angel. And I think we have Melanie.
Hi, I'm Melanie. I go to John F. Kennedy High School and I'm a junior.
Thank you, Melanie. And Tyrone.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tyrone. I go to Denver North High School. I am a sophomore. I am also a student board of education rep for North High School.
Awesome. Great. So I know we still have a considerable amount of students that should be joining, but I did sound a lot. I sent a last minute message hoping that maybe they did not forget. But I do think that maybe we could go ahead and get started with the folks that we do have. Just to give you all a heads up, everyone did receive the agenda, but just to go through it really quickly so we know what we're going to be covering. We do want to give space for Susanna and Dr. Olson and Director Anderson to talk us through a little bit about the COVID-19 preparations around gradual reopening of the schools and learning a little bit more about what health officials and that collaboration have looked like and what you all are considering for the future. So that's one thing. After that, we do want to open up some time and space to have a conversation around that gradual reopening. If there's any questions that students you all have or clarifications that you need, that those are things that you all are getting answered, and vice versa. Maybe also an opportunity for the adult partners that we have in the call to really give us some more guidance and clarification around some of that information. After that, I do want to transition us over from a conversation around reopening to more conversation around virtual learning and what that has looked like during COVID-19 and the impacts that it has had on y'all's learning, whether it has been positive or negative, areas of improvement, gaps, and what you hope to see is improved or addressed as time goes on. And in that conversation, we have some preset questions that were sent to us, some of which were collected from conversations that we've had with students in the past. But then it will also be open for both our adult partners and our young partners to have a conversation and add to those questions or bring up more questions if those are pertinent. And then at the very end, after that conversation, it will just be an open Q&A to address any questions concerning, I know, issues that matter to you all, such as mental health, which will probably come up in other areas of the agenda, but really just leaving it open for you all to have a more in-depth conversation around anything that might have not been answered earlier. So I hope that sounds good for everyone. If I missed something or you all want to cover something else, please use the chat function. As your moderator, I will be making sure that I'm looking at that. And if there's questions or anything else that comes up, I'll be taking note and making sure that we are able to answer those at some point during the meeting. Great. Are there any questions before we get started? Okay, let me see if I can pin you right now. I think you're pinned now. Okay, great. Cool. So let's go ahead and open it up to our superintendent, Susana Cordova, to talk to us a little bit more about what it would mean for us to do gradual reopening, what that's going to look like, and the feedback that you all have received from partners and health professionals.
Great. So thank you, Magnolia. And we do have a couple more students who have joined us. I wondered if it might make sense to give them a chance just to introduce themselves.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, let me see who. I see that Deva, you joined us. If you could introduce yourself, tell us your name, the school you go to, and the grade that you're in. Did you hear us, Diva? Diva? Okay. Maybe they can't hear us.
Hi.
Well,
Sorry.
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was having a little bit of a tech problem. So
No
yeah,
worries. Okay, if you could tell
high
us your
school.
name, the school, and the grade.
Yeah. Did I type that in or is that
Yes, if you're having, go ahead, type it in the chat, and then I'll read it out loud to everyone else. Thank you. I also see
okay.
that Melanie joined us. Oh no, Melanie, you already introduced yourself. Rosie.
Hi everyone. I apologize that I'm in a dark room and you can't really see my face. But my name is Rosie Molina. I go to John F. Kennedy High School. I'm a senior. Um, is that all that I needed to say?
That is it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you for joining us. And then I have from Deva Stillwell, sharing that she's from Northfield High School and she is a senior this year. Am I missing any other student? No? Okay.
Great. So why don't I go ahead and jump in, and then would love to have both Dr. Olson and Director Anderson jump in at any point. This has been probably the most complicated school year start that any of us have ever grappled with. Certainly when we went out on March 13th, Friday the 13th, about 6 months ago, I don't think any of us anticipated that we would be in remote learning for the end of the semester, much less all the way into this school year. It's been incredibly challenging. But I would love to share with you just a little bit about how we've approached the work of supporting students both with remote learning to start the year, and then what a gradual and safe reentry into in-person looks like. And please, Director Anderson and President Olson, at any point jump in. When we made the decision to go out on March 13th, we did so based on the guidance of Dr. Bill Berman, who's the Chief Medical Officer at Denver Health. He works very closely with Dr. Steve Federico, who helps run the school-based health clinics that serve students in 20 of our DPS schools, mostly high schools, but several middle schools also have health clinics. And so we've been really fortunate. We actually have a weekly meeting with Dr. Berman and Dr. Federico where they can help us interpret the guidance that comes out from the Colorado Department of Education and the Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment. Dr. Berman in particular is the lead doctor advising Mayor Hancock on how the city has approached reopening businesses, city offices, restaurants, bars, all of the things inside the city and county of Denver. And he monitors both COVID outbreaks, COVID response, the COVID testing for the city and county of Denver, and works as the co-chair of a metro area group of doctors and public health department officials who have been working in collaboration around the metro area response, both for schools and for other city agencies. So we've been really fortunate to be able to work with them. But something that's been really challenging, I think it's been challenging for us inside DPS, I think it's been challenging for our community, is just how quickly things can change with COVID and the importance of being able to make plans, but be flexible about those plans in the event that something changes, either numbers go up or numbers go down. And so in our weekly meetings, they've helped us, the Department of Education and the state came out with guidance around schools and how schools should reopen. But they don't dictate exactly what happens everywhere. And every county is charged, every school district is charged to work with their local health department on how to interpret what's happening with COVID cases in our city and how to interpret the guidance. And so that's what we have been doing with the doctors. You all have heard and experienced sort of the ups and downs of COVID rates are going down, we can open up schools more broadly, and then pause, COVID rates are going up, let's slow down a little bit. The way we've been approaching it really has been to say the most important thing we can do is safeguard the health and safety of all team members. That's our students, that's our teachers, that's our school leaders, which is why our board has been committed to a safe and gradual reentry into school so that we can protect our students and our staff as we look at the opportunities for in-person learning. So I'm going to pause and just see, Dr. Olson meets with us on a regular basis with the doctors to see if there's anything you wanted to add.
It's so complicated. I really think Superintendent Cordova, the very day that all of these decisions were being made, she called me. I remember clearly I was on my way to visit Emily Griffith High School to do a school tour. And she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm going to do a school visit." She's like, "I think you and all the board members need to get down here to the Emily Griffith to the 12th floor because we're going to be making some big decisions." And I think that was the first time that I realized how serious COVID was. I had had some other personal experiences with my daughter being in a foreign country during this, but Director Anderson will probably remember that day when I called and I said, "Anybody who's available, come." And ever since then, the board has really been a part of listening in on these conversations, and Superintendent Cordova has asked us for our opinion and our advice as we listen to this. And it's really complicated. I think on one hand, we know for sure we want to keep everybody safe and everybody protected from this disease, especially when we look at how it impacts our students and our families of color. It's incredibly high for like our Latino population in Southwest Denver and our Black students in the far Northeast and their families. Thinking about that, we want to keep everybody safe. And we know you need to be in school and be in front of your teachers and see your friends. So somewhere in the middle of that, of keeping everybody safe and knowing you need to be in school, is where we've been navigating ever since March. And it's really challenging. We listen to the doctors weekly, hear their thinking. They've made some videos for us. We're very grateful, but we're very different from Douglas County. We're very different from Cherry Creek. We're different from Westminster. We have different populations. We turn in our plans to different health authorities. So that's also hard because people will email us and say, you know, "Why aren't you doing what this high school is doing in Cherry Creek?" Or "Why aren't you doing this?" And it's because we are really thinking locally about our population. Even though for one of you, it might seem like, well, my friends down the street, I live near the border and they're fine and they're in school. We have to think all of Denver public schools. And it has been really challenging. I don't know, Director Anderson, if you want to jump in on anything.
Yeah, it was, can you guys hear me? Cool. It's actually a really scary sight. I think I was also on my way to a school visit, and I got a call to say, come downtown. And it was just it was like one of those movie scenes where everybody is like rushing. I felt like if anybody has ever seen the movie Independence Day, I know that really dates me. It was before I was born, but I've watched it plenty of times to give this reference of where they're all rushing into the Presidential Emergency Operations Center and sitting down with the president. That's how it kind of felt like sitting down in those meetings with Susanna and the rest of the board, is like with the leadership of our district, really trying to figure out what were we going to do next. And that was super big for me to really kind of figure that out. And then also being involved with really making sure, I was so grateful that we were able to continue to provide lunch and breakfast to our children, still being able to provide continuity of services for mental health supports, and figuring out other ways for us to continue to support our students through this difficult time, and all of the learners that needed us the most during this time. And one thing that I'm hopeful for, because as you know, I was really a proponent of like, do not start schools in August. And I have had parents from both of the sides and students from both sides saying, we want to go back, we want to stay home. And it's really kind of, I don't believe it's an either or situation. I think we have to modify it family by family and case by case. And I believe that there will be a day where you all will be able to return to having your normal school life again, where you'll be able to have the homecoming and the homecoming dances, and you'll be able to have the football games and the social experiment, the social part of high school. It'll be back. I can't promise you when, but I can at least say that if we continue to do our part and maintain social distancing and wearing masks, then I know we'll be able to continue to slow the spread of coronavirus. And looking forward to being back into whatever. I mean, education will never look the same, and that's good, because now we get to learn about how we can do new things and to create new avenues. And hey, snow days may be extinct. You may be the generation that gets to say you were the end of snow days. I'm kidding, but you never know. So thanks for having me.
So I put in the chat here a link to our website that actually has some graphs from Denver Health. So Denver Health on a daily basis updates a bunch of different metrics around COVID. The one that I just put in the chat right now is what Denver Health reports for DPS, but I'm also going to put in their website where they have information about COVID in the city and county of Denver, because it's actually really helpful to be able to just get a picture of what's going on in our community with COVID-19 and why we've taken the stance of a slow and conservative reentry into school. On the DPS site, if you check out that link, it'll take you to the place where it populates current COVID conditions in Denver. It uses 3 stoplights, which currently are red, red, and green. So a lot of people have asked, so why are you even bothering to come back in person if there are 2 red stoplights? And Dr. Berman actually made a video for us explaining that the stoplights are like red indicators on your car. If anybody has a car or has driven, your red light might come on, and that doesn't mean immediately stop driving. Means check out what's going on with your car, and if something is wrong, see if you can get it fixed, but it's a caution sign. It doesn't mean you can't drive your car. And so when the 2 top red lights turned red, we immediately got in touch with Denver Health to ask what's going on. Should we stop our process of gradually reentering into school? And what we learned is that there were really big increases in COVID, but it was primarily on college campuses, and that those college campus increases drove that move from green to red in a relatively short period of time. The city last week came out with a whole series of new enforcement orders for college students, including things like during athletic events, college students have to wear masks while they're actually playing sports. That you can't have groups of any size mingling together on a college campus. No fraternity parties, no sorority parties, no large gatherings. Dr. Olson actually works at DU, and so I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about some of the precautions that are in place to try to drive the numbers down.
Some of the things we had to do before we went back on campus is all of us took a video class, professors, students, adjunct faculty, any workers, anybody who's coming on the campus, of all the ways we need to keep ourselves safe. And we can't go into any buildings unless we scan. We have to wear a mask the whole time. When we walk in a door, we use hand sanitizer. When we go to sit down, we clean our area and we use hand sanitizer. When we leave, we do the same thing. DU has had better success, I think, than Boulder right now. I'm sure you've heard about the University of Colorado Boulder, and DU isn't there yet. In talking with my students today, a lot of my students are in the like 24 to 30 age range. They're all studying to be teachers, so I'm teaching in the teacher education program. And they all say that they're working with their students to help understand what it means to keep safe, because the better that we can do as a community, the more likely we're going to be able to come back. And it was interesting. Today was the second time that one of my classes met in person, and a lot of people didn't want to leave class. They kept hanging out saying, it's just so good to see you. Like, it's so good to see people. And I'm sure you know how that is. And a couple kids said we haven't even gotten to know each other in this cohort because all we are is always online. And they see that with their students. Some of them are high school, some are middle, and some of them are elementary school teachers. But I guess the big thing that I've learned from sitting on the calls with the doctors is we all need to do our part. Always wear your mask. Always use hand sanitizer. Encourage your family and friends to do that. Normalize it. One of the videos that we saw before getting back at DU was how to prepare yourself to go to social situations. How will you talk to somebody who's not wearing a mask? How will you keep your mask on if everybody else is taking their mask off? What can you do to be safe? And it reminded me a lot of when I used to teach drug and alcohol education. And I try and talk to my teenagers, like, what are you going to do when you get to a party and everybody's drinking and you've decided not to? Or what do you do if somebody wants to get in a car where somebody's with a drunk driver? I think we really need to be thinking ahead when we go to social situations. How can you prepare yourself? One of the suggestions they had is get a buddy. And, can you two gang up together and say, if they're not wearing a mask, let's look at each other and say, we're going to leave, or how are you going to deal with that? Because really, in the community, we all have to do our part. That's why the numbers went down so much in the city and county of Denver, is when the governor and the mayor put the restrictions on bar closing, on the serving of alcohol and restaurants, our numbers went down. So we talk about that a lot at DU, and how can we help our students understand that. But I wasn't prepared for the level of strictness that it took to be able to get back in the building. And nothing prepares you for that until you're actually doing it, and you have to take all the tests beforehand, and you have to make sure. I can't tell you how many times I left my car without my mask, or I didn't have my ID to swipe in. So it's a new reality.
Sorry. So let me just share one more thing, and then we'll just open it up for questions. So
Okay, I think we might be having a little bit of a technical issue because we cannot hear you coming in.
I think she froze. And her dog Baby always loves to tell us how Baby feels about things.
Cool. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and mute.
I can hear you. Can you hear me now? I can hear you guys again.
Oh, now we can hear you.
Yep, that's clear now.
Sorry about that. So let me just do this, and then we'll just stop and just start answering some of your questions. So this is what our gradual reentry looks like. And all of this obviously is going to continue to be guided by the experts at Denver Health. So our 3 and 4-year-olds started 3 weeks ago in our centers, 2 weeks ago in our elementary schools. Tomorrow, we're starting back with kindergarten, and our elementary schools have all built schedules where kindergarten students are beginning to come back starting tomorrow, and then over the next several days, they'll be continuing. We have a few schools that are starting with first grade this week as well. Next week, first grade will start. The week after that, the week of August 12th, we're calling that the Health and Safety Training Week, where all students in 2nd through 12th grade will have the opportunity to learn all of the new protocols, just like Dr. Olson talked about at DU. It's things like no water fountains, but water bottles only, or one-way hallways, how to pick up lunch, just all of the new ways that we're going to keep people safe. Mask wearing, when you can take your mask off, hand washing, sanitizing, just all of the new normal that we're all grappling with. So that's the week of the 12th. And then by October 21st, the goal is to have students back in school if you've selected in-person learning. I know that there was a question about like when kids go back, is it going to be full-time? Is it not going to be full-time? What does it look like? What's really great about Denver, but it's also really complicated about DPS, is we have some high schools that have 60 kids. We have some high schools that have 2,500 kids. And so the plans at every school are going to look different and will be built based on the number of students who have selected virtual versus in-person, the number of teachers who are available to work. Many of our teachers have accommodations because of health conditions, so they can only work remotely. The size of the school, the size of the classrooms, and then putting that together, particularly at high school, has been extremely challenging. Here are some of the rules that we have to use from the health department. Kids can only interact with up to 35 other kids. That's any time that they're in school. It has to be the same 35 kids unless there's a break that's at least 3 full days. That can be over a weekend, but you can't change the 35 kids that you interact with unless you have a 3-day break. Teachers can only interact with up to 70 students. There are rules around the number of teachers that can interact with a class at any given time. There are rules around how much space we need to have between kids, and particularly at the secondary level, schools are really trying to get more space closer to the 6 feet as opposed to the 3 feet. With younger kids, the risk is less than it is with older kids. And so it's likely that in our elementary schools, it'll be a little bit easier to have kids in full time, whereas in our secondary schools, in many circumstances, it'll be more on a hybrid basis where it's 2 days a week or in half-day segments, multiple days during the week. So Carrie just posted the guidance. And to Carrie's point in the chat, the other thing that I would say, if you haven't been wearing a mask all day, I would definitely recommend you put several different masks. I know I have, and there are some masks that are just easier to wear all day. And so definitely figure out the masks that are most comfortable. Yep, there you go. Figure out the kind of cloth that feels most comfortable. Figure out, if you're washing it every day, figure out the kind of soap that you like, because it makes a big difference when you're wearing it, what it smells like. Just all of those things really, really make a big difference. So why don't we just open it up for questions?
Yes, thank you for that. So I see that Tyrone's questions already got answered. Is there any other student that has a question?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, like, what would the benefits be of going back to school rather than staying online, if there are any?
Yeah, sure. So thank you. We've been doing surveys of students. We started doing it last spring when we first went into remote. We did it again 2 weeks after school started in the remote environment. And what we're finding is that kids are telling us via these surveys that they are not experiencing time in virtual learning as beneficial as they did in the spring. So we're seeing like a slide from the top toward the middle. At the bottom end, we're seeing a little bit. So I think we asked people, how are you feeling? And they say, great, very good, good, okay, not good, bad, I think is the scale. We've seen a little bit of an increase. Last spring, it was like 2% bad up to 4% bad. We're seeing a big slide toward the middle. So a lot of people who were great or very good are now sort of down in the okay range. I think we're definitely hearing from students concerns around mental health. Our systems all around our Safe to Health system and the software that we use to find out when kids are reaching out via email with mental health crises, that we're definitely seeing go up. And so we know that for some kids have, I'm at my house right now, I had to leave the office. I have good Wi-Fi and it kicked me off. For some kids, particularly if you've got multiple kids at home, Wi-Fi is really challenging. And so I think I think there are lots of benefits for being in person. We have opened up remote learning support centers at several schools already, and more are starting. And kids are just telling us that it's so beneficial to see their teachers, to see their friends, even if what they're doing is interacting virtually in their classes.
Okay, and then I have one more question. If we choose to go into school, is there like a way that we could, if we don't end up liking it, go back to remote learning, or do we have to stay in if that's what we choose?
Yeah, so thank you. Especially I think at high school, where a lot of schools are going to have a pretty healthy mixture of classes in person and classes remote. And what we've also learned from other districts that have opened up already, there are definitely times when students, for a variety of different reasons, might have to leave their in-person class to switch into virtual. So for example, If you are exposed to somebody with COVID outside school, you have to go into a quarantine. But if the rest of your class is still meeting in person, you can't just skip 2 weeks of school. And so we are definitely going to see people having to kind of go in and out of in-person and remote. If you're making a full-scale change, what I think we'll have to do is work with each school on how we can support those schedules. For the most part, I think most secondary schools are building schedules where kids can be both virtual and in person in the same class. So I don't think it'll be a problem, but I would definitely recommend you talk with your school if that's a decision that you want to make after you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley, for those great questions. Does anybody else have any other questions?
So the question in the
I have
chat
a question.
here. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry. So I was just wondering, what do the classes virtually and in person look like for students with special needs? Like, do they have any accommodations, or are they just having the same school day that like people without needs are having?
Yeah, so thank you. And I'll try to answer that along with the question about masks and whether or not you can refuse to wear masks. So one of the things that we're trying to make sure is that everybody understands for in-person learning, unless you have a medical condition that prohibits you from wearing a mask, everybody will be wearing a mask anytime that they're in a building. And you can take your mask off to eat. For our little kids who take naps at schools, you can take your mask off when you're taking a nap. You can take your mask off outside if you're more than 6 feet away from other people. But the reality is for all of us in school or outside of school, if you're around people who are not your family members, or if they're not part of your bubble where you know that you are only interacting with each other, everybody should be wearing a mask when we're out in public because it's going to be the best way to protect each other from getting or transmitting COVID. So we are going to work, we're trying to make sure that students with special needs who can't wear masks will have a different approach to what safety looks like. We have ordered plexiglass dividers. We have ordered face shields for students. And we definitely will have to think about how we can put more space if there's a medical reason why kids can't wear their mask. But it's going to be really important that everybody's wearing a mask while they're in school. For students who have special needs, we'll have a variety of different approaches. Everybody with special needs has an individual plan. And so in that individual plan, we'll be working on what services can be delivered in person. If they choose to be in person, if they choose the 100% virtual environment, we'll also work on what their IEP would look like for that. There are definitely some things where teachers need to be up close with kids. And so in those cases, we'll have extra PPE for teachers just to make sure that everybody can stay safe.
Yeah, so I do have a quick question.
Yeah.
So for schools who are not going to be like using their cafeteria because we can't be like all in one cafeteria at one time, so would that be used as like a space for students to sit for remote learning, spaced out? That way we're not, say for instance, your school doesn't have enough space and all the classrooms cannot be like, they only can hold so many students, and you have like your common areas that are not being used, such as the cafeteria, the gym, or the auditorium. Would those be considered spaces that would be used for remote learning as well?
Yeah, it definitely can be used for that. Cafeterias in particular will probably also be used for just like grab and go food. And so it's going to be really important. Obviously, we want to make sure that kids are still getting nutrition. But like you said, it's not going to be sitting down like in a restaurant or like in a cafeteria the way it was, because we need to have more space between everybody.
I have a quick question. So I'm not sure if this is a question that I should be asking you or more towards like my school specifically, but our school goes from 8 to 3 every day. And I know that other schools go from, or they only have like 2 hours of school or something like that every single day. I'm just wondering, are there like guidelines of how long we have to, or we're able to stay in school every day? And like how would East schedule, let's say, versus our schedule look different, if you get what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. So I haven't actually seen your school schedule up close and in person, so I can't speak to it as directly. For schools that are offering in person at the secondary level, we ask that every school have a minimum of 10 hours of in person plus the remaining time for virtual classes, homework, the kind of like how we're doing it in the remote environment. Just because you're in person less time should not mean that you're doing less work than it takes to complete all of your classes. And so, frankly, I think it's going to feel a lot more like a college schedule where college students don't take 6 hours of classes a day. They might have their classes 2 times a week for 2 hours at a time, and then work that they do outside of that. So I think many of our schools have come up with schedules that look a lot more like college schedules, frankly, where it's a combination of the work that you do when you're in person and then the work you do to complete the work that you get in person to be able to do that. At East, what I can tell you is East has 2,000 students that selected in-person learning and about just under 500 that selected virtual. And so to create a schedule that allowed 2,000 kids to actually have access to in-person learning, East is also using a quarter system with 4 classes a quarter. They've designed their schedule so that students take 2 classes in person and 2 classes virtually, and they meet with their 2 classes in person twice a week, and then they do their virtual classes the rest of the time. Many of our schools are looking at a different kind of school day than they might have done in the past, so it might be longer on one day but not on another day. It might be a shorter day all around to try to build a schedule that works for. It's sort of like this really complicated like jigsaw puzzle of how many kids, how many teachers, how many classes, how many course offerings you need to try to put together. So no 2 schools are going to look exactly alike.
Great. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
There is another question in the chat around having campus lunch off campus. And then somebody from North High School did share that that school specifically will not be allowing traveling in and out of the building. Do you have any idea around that question for other schools?
Yeah, lunch is definitely one of the complicating factors. And some of it depends on, again, like how many kids in the building and whether or not they're there across lunchtime or not. I think, and to Tyrone's point, in the schools that started with a regular 7-period schedule or 8-period schedule are really trying to continue those classes so kids get a full semester's worth of credit to be able to complete that. The schools that did what we call a 4x4 schedule, where they're doing more kind of like block classes, are starting a whole new set of classes second quarter. And so they've got some flexibilities that I think may think a little bit differently about how they're building their schedule. And so I'm not sure how everybody is approaching lunch, but that would definitely be something good to check with your school around how that's working.
Thank you. There's a question from Deva about, well, asking, in the winter, will students be forced to sit outside in all weather conditions?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's really interesting. So there's this whole movement in like in Norway that they call forest schools, where kids are outside all year round, including in really cold weather. They're bundled up, or they do a lot of their learning outside. I don't think we're there yet, truthfully. What we do know is that it is safer outside, where you've got lots of space and lots of air circulation. And so I think what we're going to try to do across most of our schools is figure out how we can use the outdoors when the outdoors is usable. And so there are definitely days in the winter in Denver when you can go outside and it's, you know, nice enough if you have a jacket on. And then there are times when it's just not, like when it's sleety snow, when it's, you know, super cold. It's just not going to be reasonable to think about using the outdoors in the same way that you can, like on a day like today. And so we'll probably have to use the outdoors when it's available and appropriate. But then again, we'll have to just, we have done lots of upgrades to like our heating and cooling systems. All schools have an HVAC system, even if they don't have air conditioning. And so all of our HVAC systems have been cleaned, have been upgraded with new filtration. They've made sure that the airflow is stronger, because that's one of the things that's important for COVID, is to have air filtration and air movement to help minimize the impact of spreading it around.
Thank you for that. Another
Yeah.
question from Jayla from Northfield asks, students are reporting that they're doing about 6 hours of homework on top of 7-hour days. And she's curious about how the district is dealing with mental health and time constraints surrounding the workload.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really important. Part of what I've said for this year in particular, and Tay and Kara, I'd love for you to chime in with your thoughts on this as well. We as a district, our board has adopted 3 crisis priorities. The first one is around the health and safety of everybody, students and staff. The second is around the mental health and social emotional needs of our team. And then the third one is around making sure that we have quality learning and that we're helping accelerate learning from the lost time last spring. And so I do think it's really important, because sometimes those can feel like they're in conflict. And from Jayla's comment, it sounds like that's an approach that's really focused on the how do we accelerate learning, but it might be coming at the expense of the mental health needs. We have asked that every school have a minimum of a 30-minute SEL lesson that's built into every student's experiences over the course of the week, because we know how important it is. There are lots of kids who've experienced significant trauma, including family members who have passed away, people who have gotten sick, all of the, I've lost family members, and it's just so strange. We didn't have funerals. I didn't get to say goodbye. It's such a weird time. And we know that is having an impact on everybody. That's on top of just the workload that you're describing there. Thank you, social emotional learning, yeah. And so we do think it's really important. The only way we know if it's impacting you is if you tell us. And so I do think the most important thing you can do is speak up. It's one of the things that's been best about student voice and leadership, is just creating the space to learn more about what the experience has been like for kids.
I'd just like to echo everything Susanna said. If you know of students who are struggling, or you yourself are struggling, make sure you find a trusted adult, talk to somebody. We want to help you. Make sure that if you see a friend struggling, even if it's something that you're not sure, talk to somebody and say, I'm worried about my friend Susanna. She doesn't seem to be her normal self. If she won't open up to you, talk to somebody else. I've heard so many creative ways. I love what Tyrone put in here. There's a student support group that he runs with his social worker. I've heard of other groups like that, or teachers opening up a Google Meets, during lunch, where people can just come and talk, or on a Friday. But reach out to each other and connect with each other too, and just say, how are you doing? We know we hit the mark. One of my students today said that one of her students told her, stop asking me how I feel, I'm fine. She's like, I guess that maybe I'm asking too much, but it's better too much than not enough. I was going to also mention Safe to Tell. Maybe I'll Google that while someone else is answering. I'll put the link in here. If you're ever worried about somebody and you're worried about, I think one of the things I've thought about ever since we started this pandemic is we're one of the highest states for teen suicide. And now that teachers aren't seeing students all the time, and they don't have access to mental health resources, I really worry about our students. So I think that's really important, to look out for each other and talk to your teachers if you're worried about a student who doesn't seem to be responding to you.
There's not a lot else to add, so I concur with both Superintendent Cordova and President Olson.
Thank you. I do want to let folks know that Elliot asked if the 30 minutes of SEL, which is social emotional learning, was a requirement per day or per week. And Susanna answered that it was for every week as a minimum. Great, thank you. Students, do you all have any other questions regarding gradual reopening? I have a couple, but I do want to leave it up for you all. And these questions that I'm going to ask are coming from other students that couldn't make it today.
Just a kind of a general question. I don't know if you guys know, I think everything's really up in the air right now, but do you think, or like, when do you think we'll be back in person for like the long run or fully?
Like just normal, back to normal? Yeah, I think it's hard to say, truthfully. I was just listening to the news earlier. So it sounds like China's starting to test a vaccine now already. And so I think we'll definitely start to see movement with vaccinations. Even if we do have a vaccination that's available, say, before the end of this calendar year, it's going to probably take a while to get everybody vaccinated. Not everybody's going to be in the first round of vaccinations. Even with the vaccinations, it may not be as effective as we think it is. Like a flu vaccination, even right now, is generally about 50% effective. And so hard to say. I'm hopeful that we'll begin to see things move, even if it's not completely back to normal. At least, the state talks about 3 levels: stay at home, which is where we were in March and April; safer at home, which is where we are right now, which has a really wide continuum of what it can look like; and then protect your neighbors. And so I'm hopeful that we can get to protect your neighbors, maybe spring, beginning of next school year. But even then, I think it's likely that we're going to see some changes that last for a long time. I think after the SARS outbreak in Asia, like it's very common in Asia for people to wear masks in the wintertime when there's a lot of airborne illnesses. So I think it's likely that we're all going to probably adopt some of those practices a lot more commonly for the foreseeable future. I think there's some good things that come out of this. Like we've had schools in the past where we've had to shut them down because of norovirus or flu or things like that. I think like all of this focus on hygiene, on masks, it's going to help us in the long run. But like when we're going to be back to where we were, I don't know. It's hard to say.
Okay, and then I just have one last question. It's not really about going back to school, but how do you think COVID is going to affect like standardized testing?
Yeah, I can definitely talk about what I think is happening in the short term. I'll share with my opinion, and then we'll definitely see what happens with it. So, we're definitely seeing both from colleges pre-COVID and now even more so with COVID, a movement away from such a strong reliance on standardized testing. Not everywhere, and not in all cases, but definitely a movement away from that. In Colorado, I think it's very likely that we'll see lower participation in standardized testing. Right now, DPS has about 30% of our students who are selecting the 100% virtual program, and the state is saying that all state testing is in person. And so I just am not confident that families that are worried about sending their kids to school are going to send them to school for a test. And so at least for this period of time, I think it's probably much more important that we think about how do we support kids with learning? How do we measure progress with the work that teachers are doing? And how do we put less importance on standardized assessments? I don't think that means give up on learning, and I don't think that means it's not important, but I would not say the way to measure it right now is through standardized assessments.
Yeah, so I do have another quick question. So the SATs are scheduled for October 16th for our juniors and seniors. How would that, I know you just kind of touched bases on that. So how would that look for different, I don't know how to say it, but how would that look if we're all in a virtual setting and say, for instance, we have to take like the SAT or the PSAT with a lot of our colleges, not going like test optional or for that? How would that look for those kids?
Yeah, so the SAT and the PSAT will be on 2 different dates. I'll put it here in the chat in just a moment. Free for anybody who wants to take those tests in the targeted grades. So 11th grade for the PSAT, 12th grade for the SAT because it's the makeup for when 11th graders were doing it before. And so we have to offer it in person. We can't offer it virtually. There are a lot of test security precautions, but the way that we're planning on doing it is to ensure that there is social distancing. You do need to wear a mask. We'll have lots of health and safety procedures, disinfecting the room before and after, in large rooms, things like that, that we're doing to make sure that we can have it be safe. What I definitely would encourage you to do is to check out the schools that you're interested in applying for, to know if they are requiring the SAT or not. And if they are, definitely encourage you to make sure that you participate. There are a lot of free supports that are available that you can use through Khan Academy, through lots of different ways to help support you with your learning on that. So Tuesday the 27th for 12th graders for the SAT. And then on Thursday the 29th for 11th graders, it's the PSAT. Both exams are free.
Thank you for that. There is a question in the chat regarding daily advisories. Are those mandated outside of the SEL?
Yeah, so thank you. So a lot of our schools do use a daily advisory. Some of our schools a different schedule for advisory. We have talked a lot, especially during the pandemic, about the benefits of having a time that can be dedicated to sort of non-academic aspects of learning that are helpful for kids. There is no requirement that every school have a daily advisory, though. If you do have a daily advisory, I think that there are a lot of benefits to doing that, but that definitely is a school-based decision.
Thank you for that. What other questions do you all have?
I have another question. So I believe when like students walk into schools, they are like use a thermometer or for like, you know, to see if they have a fever. Is that the only way you're going to be testing?
Yeah. So yeah, no, great question. So everybody needs to do a health check before you come into school. You can do it on your telephone, and you can do it at home before you get to school. We'll be sharing information with students about an app that we have that's called Safe Access. It asks you to do a temperature check and then to answer a series of questions that let you know if you have any symptoms that are new or different that might be related to COVID. And if you say that you have any of those symptoms, or if you're running a fever of 101.4 or high, 100.4 or higher, we're going to ask you to stay home and get checked, hopefully with a COVID test, or until you no longer have any of those symptoms, so that we can try to make sure that we're keeping people out of our buildings. If you don't have a thermometer at home, or you can't do that before you get to school, we'll have people with thermometers. They're the touchless ones. They point them at your forehead to check your temperature before you can come in.
Thank you. I'm also wondering about what about like students or teachers that may be asymptomatic? Like, what's that going to look like with risks and everything?
Yeah, so thank you. You know, obviously we've all learned a lot about like when people have symptoms, when people don't have symptoms. I think the doctors are learning more all the time about when people are most contagious. And so it does kind of run the range. There definitely are people who have symptoms. We have, for example, we've had a lot of people working since March. Our food service teams, our custodial teams, we had people helping set up classrooms. So we've had lots of people working. Central office folks have been working. We definitely have caught people through the health check, asked them to, you know, go get checked, and it turns out that they have COVID, so we've been able to keep them out. For people who are asymptomatic, as soon as we do know, so there is a massive effort through public health to make sure that anybody who has COVID, that it is reported through a huge database where they contact employers. We're using a COVID check system for all of our employees so people can get tested as frequently as every 2 weeks to find out asymptomatically if they have COVID or not. And we're really encouraging our teachers to take advantage of that because we want to try to catch it as much as possible. For our students, we're in the process of working on being able to offer COVID testing for kids who have symptoms. It's a lot harder right now for us to figure out if we can get somebody who can do asymptomatic testing of kids. But for adults, that is part of what we're offering to all of our employees to help keep people healthy.
Great. Okay. So we're getting close to, oh, well, we are at 7. So I do have a couple of questions that came from other students that weren't able to make it. And I do ask that the students that are present, if you all have more questions, we will have more time at the end of today's forum to come back to some of those questions. But I'm going to ask these couple questions and then we'll move on to the section around really having a discussion with you all as students around like mental health, virtual learning, and the impacts of COVID, whether they're positive or negative. Okay, one of the questions for one of the students was, is there going to be a difference in terms of grade or credit depending on whether you choose to do virtual versus in person? Or will the same grading expectations be the same for all students across, regardless of whether you choose to be in person or not?
Yeah, so we're really trying to make sure that both in-person and virtual have the same expectations, same level of rigor, same supports, same grading systems. So we won't hopefully need to think of anything differently. What I would say is, if for any reason, just like always, you're encountering problems, you're having trouble with Wi-Fi, you're struggling in the virtual environment, you're sick, your family's sick, just let your teachers know. I think it's really important that we do, communicate. We understand like this is not a normal time. And we do need to do what we can to support each other during a time like this. I don't think it should come at the expense of your classwork and your preparation. And so as much as possible, we want to help accelerate learning because we know that it's been such a disruptive time. It hasn't been typical, and we don't want kids to get behind.
Great. And the last question, which I think pretty much might have already been answered, but how did you all go around deciding that October 21st was going to be the date to come back? And does it have to do anything with October count?
Yeah, great question. So October count is actually October 1st. So starting on the 21st is 20 days late for October count day. We actually can count all of our students who are engaging in the virtual environment as well as if we were in person. So October 21st really was the date because that's the beginning of second quarter. When we made the announcement that we would be remote in first quarter. And then based on a lot of feedback, particularly from families of little kids, we started the slow, gradual process at the elementary level in advance of secondary. It's been really challenging, I think, for little kids to learn in a virtual environment, particularly 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds. Before you know how to read, figuring out how to do stuff on a computer is just really hard. And we definitely heard from parents that they were concerned that their kids were not able to really fully access learning in a virtual environment at those ages. And so that's why we accelerated the timeline for them. I think it's helped us do it safely, slowly, and thoughtfully.
Great, thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and transition over to a discussion around the impacts of COVID, both on our learning, on our mental health, on our social engagement with peers and in school. I have a couple of questions that have been asked ahead of time, and I'm going to ask those actually to our students and have you all share your thoughts and ideas on them for both our superintendent and our board members to be able to learn more from you. But I also want to encourage and open that if there are additional questions that either the adults in the call or even students that you all have of each other, that you go ahead and open up and ask those as well. So the first question is just really overall, how has the pandemic impacted you? So could we have a couple of students that could answer that question for us?
Yeah. Some ways COVID has impacted me at the very beginning. I'm a very social person, so I love to be around people, like always talking with people. So at first we went into that initial quarantine, and I literally couldn't see anyone for about 2 or 3 months. It was really hard on my mental health. Because the only way I could talk to any of my friends where it was for FaceTime. And then once I started being able to see, my parents would allow me to go see smaller groups of people. So I would see these people that I would see over and over again, which is great. But I also couldn't see the people that like I'm kind of friends with and would hang out with sometimes. And then once now that we're back in school and we're not in person, I really enjoyed. I realized from this pandemic that I really enjoyed more like acquaintances in school that I wouldn't necessarily hang out with outside of school, but I like to talk to and I enjoy their company inside of school. So I'm really missing that. I'm missing my teachers extremely. I had great relationships with all of them. I'm it's I love to build relationships with all my teachers, and it's hard to do that over remote learning. Um, and sometimes I feel like the weird kid because I'm coming in and actually talking in my virtual class, which a lot of kids don't like to talk, but I like to try to actually like have a conversation. It's been hard, but we're getting through it for sure.
Yeah, I'm just gonna add to that. I think it has been really hard on my mental health because going into school, like a huge part of that is seeing people and making great relationships with everyone, which is, and COVID has put a major strain on that. I do have two people who I do school with, but a lot of it was also just talking to my teachers after school and like seeing how they're doing and stuff like that, which really helped motivate me to want to do better in school because I wanted to like prove myself as a good student. So not having the ability to really talk to them and see like how they're doing and seeing how they feel about me as a student is just super hard. And then I miss all my friends who I've met. Like I met so many people at Northfield, and not being able to communicate with them has been so hard on me. It's just like super upsetting, but it's good that we can still be on the computers to talk to each other in some sort of way.
Yeah, and so I'm just going to add to that as well. I would say that it did take a big toll on my mental health as well because I am also a very social person, and just like immediately when we went into quarantine, I just felt like I'm being shut out. Like there is nobody that I could talk to besides like my family, like the people that are in my household, and I just felt like it wasn't it wasn't enough for me to just like be stuck in the house from that extended spring break going into summer. Um, and I definitely think the pandemic has not only it's broken a lot of our relationships, but it's also like built us as like people. And I definitely miss like being on my campus with all the things that I do on my campus and off campus. Um, because I'm just like so involved on our campus, and the leadership roles that I serve on our campus is more of in person, and not being able to interact with those people on different days. Like one of my favorite things that I did at our school was Viking volunteers, and we had that every Wednesday and Friday. On Fridays we would have like where we just go to like a restaurant or something like that and hang out, or and then Wednesdays we would do our volunteer work. And I just feel like it's taking a big toll on my mental health because I'm not able to have that interaction to talk to any of those people that are in that club, and it just really like impacts my mental health. I just can't think of anything else besides how it impacted my mental health, because that really, I felt like that was the most social thing that I had at my school. Um, and it's just sad to see that the club has gone away. And this year was actually going to be my first year ever in charge of that club. And so it really just hurts to see that I can't have that interaction with the group of people that we have. So yeah, mental health is mainly the big one.
Tyrone, can I ask
Yeah.
a question and just a follow-up to anybody? Like, are your schools doing any virtual clubs or virtual activities?
So for clubs, we were talking about virtual clubs, but we put a hold on it because a lot of our clubs aren't like clubs that can be held online besides our advisory, which is SBOE. Um, because the clubs that we have at my school is very like community wise. So like Viking volunteers who reach out to the community, chess club that's like different tournaments. And we have so many clubs, the LGBTQ club, Pride Club, or GSA, BSA, all those clubs are very like in-person wise clubs. It could be virtual, but it's not going to be as easy as it was when we were in person because all of our clubs run community outreach.
I know with our school, a lot of the clubs are running virtually. Right now, I'm in the thespian club, and we meet every Monday. We attempt to do like theater games and stuff through the meetings, which aren't very fun, if I'm being honest, but it is a way to bring us all together. And that also kind of is a way that COVID has affected me. I think it's added a lot of stress because at school I would be a part of theater, which I know kids are a part of a lot of different things, but theater wasn't really my outlet to get like stress out. So without that and that being taken away, it kind of really builds up because I have no way to get that stress out, if you get what I mean.
I wanted to add, in terms of how COVID's affecting me. When we first went into the quarantine, I got a job and I pushed a lot on activism and actually getting engaged in my community. I spent more time with my family, etc., which wasn't a huge deal for me since I'm not super social, but I don't mind engaging every now and then. However, it didn't hurt me in that sense. I am finding that as of recently, with the new school regulations and how schools are working now, I did have to quit my job and I did have to give up a lot of aspects of my activism. And lately, I've been getting severe lacks of sleep. So on average, I'll get 3 or 4 hours max. And then in addition to that, one of the things that came up as an issue was just actually being able to communicate with people in terms of teachers and whatnot and having those issues discussed. My school has sent out surveys, and I know that there have been surveys from the district. However, it's at this point just a matter of getting those things integrated. I know that a lot of kids are feeling like they're going to fail or that they're not being listened to at this point. I think I kind of have a unique perspective in the sense that when I was in middle school, all 3 years of middle school, I did homeschooling. So I figured that this would be a lot easier given that adjustment that I already have. It's a bit of an advantage in that sense. However, I do remember my homeschooling year as being one of my lowest points, again, in terms of mental health. And one of the things that concerns me about schools as of recently is that a lot of people are beginning to hit that low, and I can already feel myself starting to hit that low. So at this point, it's just a question of what to prioritize. Because like I said in the chat, on average, students are dedicating roughly 13 hours a day to school, and then they have activities and everything else. And it's just getting absolutely absurd in that sense, which makes it difficult for everybody involved.
Jayla, can I ask you a question? Do you feel like the workload is higher now than it was when it was like a normal beginning of school last year? Remind me, what grade are you, Jayla?
I'm a senior.
So do you think it's like your senior year? Do you think it's the combination of remote and homework? Like what do you think is contributing to such a long day for students? Or do you think that's what it would have been like even if we were in person?
I will say that I am definitely a little bit biased in that aspect because I do the IB diploma program at my school, so it's naturally a little bit busier for me. However, with other students that I've been able to communicate with that aren't necessarily in the program, that are, sophomores that aren't actually able to do it, they are saying that the workload's not necessarily heavier. It's just that having to do it all at home and sit there for 7 hours a day just isn't really working out. On top of the fact that they feel that the work has no actual relevance to what they're learning in the class. So it was described to me as just being busy work, if that makes sense. It's just stuff to fill space because you have 7 hours worth of time, which means 7 hours worth of work. And you have, 7 different teachers that aren't fully acknowledging that the other 6 are also doing the same thing that they are.
Thank you.
Yeah, I relate to JLo's perspective a lot. I found I haven't been getting enough sleep with school. And it's not that there's more work, it's that teachers are trying to keep the same amount of work, which just doesn't work. So for me, school provided a lot of structure, and this is kind of the earlier question. So not being social, it provided academic structure. So when kind of COVID hit and everything stopped suddenly, I shut down for several weeks and I just didn't do schoolwork for 3 weeks, which was obviously a problem. But now like I finally managed to get into it, but now like doing that means being very sleep deprived, and it's still like it feels like it's very unbalanced. I think there's staring at a screen for 10 hours a day, it's really unhealthy, and it causes your body to hurt and it makes you really really tired. So that has a effect on everything else. When you go away from the screen, you don't really have energy to or in my experience, you don't have energy to do healthy things and engage in kind of coping mechanisms that would help lift you up if you weren't staring at a screen.
And yeah, to add on to what she said, there is the workload for us students who are taking like AP classes. It isn't slow. It's not slow. The work is coming very rapidly. And I understand that we only have a certain amount of hours. We do have office hours and stuff like that, but I feel like the workload is taking a huge toll on like a lot of students who are taking AP classes or honors level classes or maybe even college level classes. And I noticed that the teachers they're not gonna slow the work. The work is not gonna stop coming just because you feel like it's a lot. They're just constantly piling up work every single day, and it's just not slow enough. It's not coming enough for you to understand. I do feel like that's taking a lot of toll because at my school, I've noticed that a lot of students, the teacher can sit there all day and explain the lesson, and students still are just like so confused. Like questions come like, "What are we doing?" or "How does this work?" or stuff like that. So I definitely feel like the workload is taking a huge toll on tons of students, not just at North, but at different campuses throughout the district.
So regarding what Ms. Cordova said in the chat, she said exercise is a huge asset to getting better quality sleep. For me, during quarantine, like the initial quarantine, I exercised every day for like 2 hours. And then once school started, I'm so tired by the end of the day that I have no motivation or I have no time to do any exercise. So it's kind of like they kind of all add up to like not having any motivation to really do anything besides school and then trying and attempting to sleep.
Well, and I think that like when you're in person in school in pre-COVID, there's a lot of like incidental exercise that happens too. It's like walking around with your friends, just messing around, running around at lunchtime, just all of the incidental things. That's just so much harder to do. You do have to build it in differently to be able to support that. I'm sure like you guys live in the same world I live in. You hear the same news I hear. You probably hear a lot more of it if you're on social media, then I hear, like, that alone is keeping me up at night. Like, I wake up every night at 2 in the morning, like, just thinking about, like, all of the things that are happening in the world. I know it's a lot of people are talking about interrupted sleep patterns. Some of it's the work, I think, that you're doing. Some of it's the world, you know? Yeah.
Thank you for that. I did want to direct us a little bit. So I appreciate everything that everyone is sharing. I think that it's also very important for us to keep in mind. And with all of that being shared, I want us to direct us, because I do see us talking a lot about mental health and just our health in general. And so I wanted to ask the students if you all have, there has been a couple of you that have mentioned some strategies that either your school or your clubs have done to try to cope, or not just cope, but have tried to address mental health. But what would you say are some things that maybe schools or DPS leadership or teachers should be taking into consideration when talking about how to support you the best in being as healthy and as stressless as possible?
Well, I just think that teachers just like by just reaching out through in the classes and just by asking how everyone's doing and maybe taking time to just give students like a minute to kind of like reflect and like take a deep breath in and realize that like everything's gonna be okay. Because I know like everybody that I know is just so overwhelmed and so stressed. Like we only have a few minutes to get to our next class and then immediately get introduced into new work. So I just think maybe if we have a few minutes in the beginning of class or the end of class, just for teachers to kind of give us a minute to just like realize everything and just ask how we're doing so we can reflect on our own mental health maybe. And then I know that we do have like every day Northfield has implemented 30 minutes for I forget what's the word, SEL, and I think it's great. Sometimes it has been directed more towards like other events. So I think maybe if it was more towards just us taking our own time, like in the morning to have 30 minutes where we can just check in and then kind of go back on our own to really just have time by ourselves, maybe to get some work done or prepare for the day, that'd be great, instead of just kind of immediately getting into school and then having school all day. And then I feel like I just go to bed and then just kind of on a repeat of being at home all day, doing work, and then sleeping.
Yeah, so I also agree with that. Another thing that that I would say we could implement is, and I don't think it could be like entire district because probably not. But the asset tool is has been really helpful for like a lot of us, but also like mentioned in the chat, our passing periods are only 5 minutes, and many of our teachers like run over that 5 minutes, and they're like, there's been times where I've had 1 minute to get to my next class, and the teacher's like, okay, you have 1 minute to get to your next class. And I feel like it puts a lot of stress on a lot of us because we don't have enough time to kind of debrief from one subject and cool off. I know it may be different for every campus, but on my campus, we have the morning from 7:30 to like 8:30 of that like debrief before you go into your advisory or advisement or first period. But I would really suggest like using that asset tool. I know a lot of us probably aren't familiar with it, but it's been really helpful with that. So yeah.
Thank you. Jayla, I saw a comment on the chat from you. Could you elaborate a little bit more with what you were trying to say?
Absolutely. So at Northfield in particular, and I'm sure it's the same at a lot of schools, they've been really pushing the whole idea of talk to your counselor, schedule meetings, talk to your teachers if you have problems, engage in clubs so you can get that social aspect. And ultimately, all it comes back to is mental health. But the issue with that, and there's no problem at all with supporting mental health, the issue with that in particular is that it works around the problem. The problem, it's not that students just aren't getting enough sleep because there's problems in the world, because there's always been problems in the world. Students aren't getting enough sleep because they're staying up till 2:30 in the morning working on absolutely absurd workloads. And then one of the things that a lot of people do in that sense, also staying up later, is, you know, they spend all day on homework and they don't finish until 11 o'clock. And then they're like, well, I need some time to myself somehow. So they spend that extra 3.5 hours till 3:30 in the morning just taking that time to themselves. I also think a lot of the problem is some of that is the social aspect, of course, but there's just not enough communication between teachers. It was a discussion came up at my school with one of the teachers where they said that the teachers don't communicate at all. So how are students expected to be successful in an environment where the teachers don't even know what everyone is doing?
Thank you, Jayla. I think those all bring good points. I wanted to open it up and see if maybe Susanna or if Kay Anderson, Carrie Olson, if you all have any other questions specific to this.
Before I ask a question, I'd just like to offer, if you've been following in the chat, we did have a sleep expert from National Jewish come on our Facebook Live, I think with Student Voice and Leadership, but it was like in April, so it's been a long time. And she gave specific tips on what you should do for sleep during pandemics, especially students. And I was thinking it'd be great to have her do a webinar with you again and have her come back and talk about sleep, because I've noticed that for myself too. And I see that in my students at TU. Like, I think it's a trend. And I also, Jayla, it sounds like you've got a lot of homework, and that's also something like, how can we help that? Because sleep is so, so, so important for your brain. So I'd love to be able to offer that. And I know that you have a lot of questions, but I'm wondering, I'm also really wondering about what's working during the pandemic for you specifically. If you can give us some examples of things that you think are going well that we should do more of, that are helping you learn and get your needs met during this time.
I think that one of the things that worked well in the beginning of the pandemic was having some form of flexibility. At my school, and I'm sure it's the same in a lot of schools, once again, it's structure, 5-minute passing periods. You stay in this class from this time to this time. Whereas, you know, in March until the end of the school year, how it worked was, yes, you have to do it, just do it on your own time. So I think what would be best for a lot of students at this point, especially students that work or have to babysit siblings and things such as that. In my case, I do have to babysit my sibling through the night, and I did have to quit my job. My last day was actually the 25th. So I think just having a sense of flexibility that would kind of allow for that. So, you know, maybe just shorter school weeks or something that offers a better support for students that can't dedicate that time and then have to watch their attendance suffer and lose out on certain school activities and privileges because of that, when it's not really their fault.
Kind of just like going off of what she said, I think that what should be implemented more is like guidelines of when schools have to have things like SEL, because I know my school does it at 8 in the morning. And I know that if it were to be at the end of the day, I'd be a lot happier because I'd be able to actually sleep more. Or just other guidelines, like our school, we have like an hour and an hour and 10 minutes or something classes, and teachers have the option whether or not to do asynchronous or synchronous the entire time. So I think if DPS were to put in rules like you had to have half asynchronous and half synchronous, like just defining things that will help us, because I know that a lot of my teachers love to just ramble on with their lesson and fill up the entire time. But I know that the teachers that do give me that asynchronous time, I do a lot better, and I'm able to focus more on my work and be more successful with that. So I think more implemented guidelines for every school would be more beneficial.
Yeah, also, I think in the beginning of March, it was super nice to just kind of, our teachers gave us all of our work at the beginning of the week, so on Monday, and then it was due on Friday. So I think if they did a mixture of like how it was then and now, where we had shorter classes, where they just kind of taught quick lessons and then gave us a lot more time to do our work on our own time, it would be much more beneficial because it's easier for me to work on like my own schedule, especially when I'm at home. So if they just did quick lessons and then gave us however long, it would be much easier.
To add on to,
Oh, Angel
sorry.
can go.
Okay. So East does like the quarter systems, and with that comes like half synchronous, half asynchronous, and I feel like that's helped me so much, especially because our days start later than they used to when we were in person. And so you either start at 8:30 and end at like 11:40, or you start at around 12:30 and end at like 2. And so that is, I can't even imagine like having full like 7 or 8 hour days. Like it's just, it seems so like like strenuous, especially on teenagers when you need like exercise and sleep. And then also it goes back to just thinking about like what time should schools start, because like I believe it's been proven that like our brains don't even fully, like wake up until around like 9 a.m. And so it just comes to like just like I don't know, like not just like right now, but like in the general scheme of things, like how are schools working? Like how are they operating? Sorry, that doesn't actually benefit students.
Yeah, one of the big things that we had hoped to do pre-COVID was have a conversation about changing high school start times to later. And so that was one of the things that sort of got delayed because of, all the crisis management for dealing with COVID. But we definitely have plans to flip elementary and high school because like little kids are frequently up early anyway, and it'd be so much nicer to have high school students start, at 8:30 or 9, like elementary does, and have elementary start, at 7:30 or 8, when parents are on their way to work anyway. So.
And the sleep doctor that we had come in the spring, she's a big proponent of that. In fact, she's testified at some school boards to get them to change it. I'll look for the YouTube video link and see if I can find it and put it in the chat. But that's why we just value her advice so much. And all of us, Susanna's senior leadership team and the board, we all agree with that.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I think that would be hugely helpful. And one nice thing about doing more asynchronous work is that an issue with that before is people had jobs in the evenings, and pushing school back would interfere with that. But if we have shorter school hours, we can start school later and still have time for jobs and fit that in where it works. And another thing I really wanted to emphasize was pre-recording lectures specifically, because it's really hard to sit still for 7 hours. And I don't personally see the point in just kind of sitting, staring at the screen and keeping yourself in the camera image when you can't ask questions during a Zoom lecture. There are 30 people and the teacher's just kind of going on with it for maybe 30 minutes or even an hour. So if you pre-record these lectures, you can actually pause them to take a break. You can sit in different places, like sit on on your couch even, to be more comfortable. And it's actually easier to learn and take notes from these because you can go at your own pace. So it's just better all around.
I would like to respectfully disagree. I think that those are great, but personally, I think a form of social interaction that I do have is in the actual lectures. I have been able to talk to my teachers and interact with other students in breakout rooms, like off of lectures, where we would have part of a lecture and then go into a breakout room and then have the other part of the lecture. So for me personally, I just wanted to bring light to the fact that it might be different for all students. I like being in the classes for a lot of them, but then I do know that like my math teacher does ed puzzles. So he assigns an ed puzzle that is basically a lecture, but then does other lectures in class that I'm able to interact with, which I enjoy.
Yeah, and so to add on to like the school schedule, I definitely think to make it equal to fit, like, because I know the state requires us to have like maybe 8 hours of school time. So I am big proponent of that, like maybe from 9 to maybe like 12, or even like our early dismissal schedule I do. And something that I do like is how it may not be flexible for everybody, but it is flexible when you're on like that block schedule. So if your school because some schools have like one schedule that they run Monday through Friday. But I like the fact that my school is able to run like a block schedule. So we have Gold Day and Purple Day. So Gold is it's periods. So it's homeroom 1, 3, 5, 7, and then purple is 2, 4, 6, 8, and then that will, I feel like that has been a big proponent of that, because Fridays we're able to get out at 12:30, and our classes are only 30 minutes a piece, and we're able to get through the lesson like this and take our notes when we need it. And plus have that time at the end of the day to reflect. But I think for schools that are running like that 1 day schedule where they're going to like either whether they're starting advisory or first period and going to seventh period, I feel like it should be structured where they have like those different days. So at my school, it's different for every campus, but for me at my school, Mondays and Wednesdays are I think it's purple days, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays are gold days, and Fridays are just like our early release schedule. So we'll start school at 8:30 and get out at 12:30. And I definitely think that puts a lot of like stress relief for a lot of our students. And we do have like that asynchronous time at the end of the day, if you need it. And if you don't, you just, you're basically done with your school day. So I definitely think that like early dismissal schedule will work for like all of our campuses, if not maybe a handful of them.
All right, thank you for that. Does anybody else want to share?
I just wanted to like sort of piggyback off of what Ashley was saying about how it's like nice to sort of like make your own schedule. So going with like the idea of what Diva said about pre-recorded lectures, would that even be possible? Like, would it be like students who want live like classrooms come in the morning and then it's recorded and then teachers post it in the afternoon? Or like would that be like a lot more extra work on teachers, and like would like is that even a possibility, like since like all students like learn differently and need different needs?
Yeah,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say in response to that, for me, it's a definite yes, because when we first switched to online learning, a lot of my teachers actually did that. So they would just like for the week, they would just post like 1 hour and a half long lecture. And I would just like go through that throughout the week, which I found to be really great. And I don't think they found that to be a problem at all.
Yeah, so I part of what I'm hearing in this conversation, I want to just check and see if I'm hearing it correctly, is this idea that it's important to have both the mixture of in-person live, when we're doing remote learning, to have the mixture of live time, asynchronous time, that from what I'm hearing here, the most powerful part of a live class is the ability to be in breakouts and interaction, that it's hard to just listen to a lecture, but you do want the opportunity to interact with your classmates or with your teacher. That the benefit of a recorded lecture, if you will, is that you can watch it at your own time, at your own pace. You can rewatch it. I'd love to just get your thoughts. We did quite a bit of surveying last spring, and by far, the people who experienced remote learning with the greatest experiences told us that they had more live instruction than the people who just had asynchronous. And it sounds like for some people here, the asynchronous worked well for you. But I'm curious, when you think about your experience or the experiences of your friends, do you have a sense of like how much live versus how much asynchronous is the right balance?
I would say at least maybe like 40 minutes for live time, and then at least a 10-minute break in between, and then another 40 minutes for that asynchronous time, just to split the time in between.
Also, maybe just like doing half and half, like having half of its time for like talking with the teachers and stuff like that, and then asynchronous is the other half, or even doing like kind of I don't know what our classes are, like 50 minutes for teacher instruction, and then that 30 minutes of asynchronous, but just kind of leaning towards that half and half mixture.
Yeah. My sense is that this is a group of kids, like we've got some IB kids, we've got, seniors who are talking about taking the SAT. My sense is like this is a group of kids who are, como dicen en español, muy aplicados, that you are like serious about your studies, that when you had asynchronous lessons, you did them, that your experience may not be the typical when you think about like the spectrum of DPS kids. When you think about your classmates who struggle in school, either in person or in virtual, do you think they would say half and half also? Or do you think that there's like depending on the style, or like what do you think are the big differentiators? Like Elliot said, he's a social person. Tyrone talked about that also, like missing out on the social aspects. Do you think there's ever a time when more live instruction makes more sense than more asynchronous? I worry about the kids who struggle with school, and then when you're on your own, it's just like it's easier to just be like, yeah, I'm just not going to do that.
I would definitely say it would be kind of different for kids who have different learning styles. So I would say like a split schedule. So if you want live instruction, you go to your live class. If you don't like live session, you can go do your synchronous time, and then still have that time like at the end once you finish like all your assignments to connect with either your teachers or your peers at the end.
I think that
and you can go.
I think that a good solution to that would be something very simple in terms of giving students the ability to choose between live and asynchronous learning. If you chose asynchronous, it doesn't have to be constant. However, you do have to do like a check-in or something, or you have to do, just a basic comprehension check once a week or once every 2 weeks. That wouldn't take you more than 30 minutes. Or you could do something, especially with kids that don't necessarily do well in asynchronous environments, that should definitely still be on the table for them. So my personal thought would be, like I said, to make that available to them at least 3 days a week, and then the other 2 days, or however that works, should be something that should be a little bit more constant in terms of the flow.
Well, something that my teachers do is during that asynchronous time, they still stay on the call. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to them, which I think is super beneficial, because people who may struggle like working on their own do have the opportunity to reach out to their teacher and ask any questions and like get guidance if they're struggling.
I agree, and I think this makes it easier too, so you're not trying to find a way to ask your questions. And also what I've seen is some teachers will actually call in students who are behind on work and talk to them about it during that time, or you can even kind of mandate that they have to stay in the meet or in the room.
I also feel like when it comes to students that are struggling, it could also just be with the household that they're in. Like we don't really know what's going on behind the cameras and like behind closed doors. So that's something that we also have to worry about, especially when it comes to mental health. So just the flexibility aspect and like being lenient, especially like when it comes to maybe Wi-Fi's down and you're like 5 minutes late to class, or like listening to like what your students have to say, and like counselors like reaching out more, because like it's hard to reach out to counselors right now, especially with colleges and everything. So just thinking about like how we can support students like that are sort of like, I don't know, it's like really hard to think about when it comes to the household and not just schoolwork.
Yeah, and I would also say like we all mentioned, that flexibility schedule would also be kind of helpful for like our kids who don't have a stable household. Like if they're living at like a shelter or may just be going through something at the moment, but they're still able to chime in and get their schoolwork done. Um, just and I feel like the remote learning sessions at our schools are helping with a lot of that. Um, but I do feel like the flexibility would be great for like those kids who don't have a stable household, who don't have like a stable Wi-Fi connection, or just those kids who are in need of things that the kids who do have a stable household or who do have the right kind of internet. I definitely think the flexibility will work for them that way, because I know, because I was in a situation before, as far as like if you live in um, a homeless shelter, most homeless shelters give you a curfew. And so that means like lights out. So I think it would be flexible for them so that they're able to chime in, get their work done, and still get their academics done while focusing on their things that they have to do while in the situation and circumstances that they are in.
Something that my school has implemented that has like helped a lot, and I think should or DPS should implement in other schools, is we do for most of my classes we do pair decks. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but the teacher does the pair deck during class. But a lot of my teachers also post the pair deck so that students are able to do them outside of school, and the pair deck is the way of like showing that students are participating. So even if the students are in class, they would still be able to show that they're participating by doing the pair deck after school or at another time.
Tyrone, I haven't heard of Jamboard. I know Pear Deck. Can you tell us a little bit about Jamboard?
Yeah, and so Jamboard, it's basically like this program where, say for instance, you're not able to log into class one day. It's just like Peer Deck, but it's like live. So it's not like you are not following along. So it's paced by your teacher. So if you're not able to go to class one day, you still have the Jamboard. So like if a question pops up on the Jamboard, you're able to go in and answer the question, submit it. So you're still participating. You just might not be in class or have your camera on. So I really like using Jamboard because it not only is live. Pear Deck and Pear Deck, I like Pear Deck as well, but Jamboard is like I could do Jamboard all day.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you all. We do have about 12 minutes left of the meeting or forum. And so I wanted to open it up to see if there was any questions from students that you all had from our adult partners in the call that's very pressing or important to you that you want to ask. And then after that, we'll also go ahead and give some room for the board members that are present and then our superintendent to ask questions that they might have. Okay, wait, let me see. There's a question around Jamboard. Does it allow you to complete an assignment after hours? Tyrone, could you please answer that in the chat? Oh, Carrie answered it. She
Okay,
said,
yeah.
yes, you can add to it at any time as long as your teacher allows it.
Yeah.
Cool. Does any student have any pressing question that they would like to ask? Nope. That's good. That means y'all got all your all your questions answered.
I do have like a quick question around like school safety. So and I know it was like just thrown at us and like none of us wasn't made aware. Um, and I know we have like our board members here. The school safety for like a lot of different campuses from my parents' perspective is like having like our SROs on campus. I think that it would provide, and I know it's like some people gave their opinion and our board members made the decision based on feedback from like our community, um, and based on data that we had. But I definitely feel like the SROs in our campuses do a great job of protecting our campuses and just having, because I can't speak for all campuses, but I know like we have the right security that we need on our campuses. Um, but I definitely feel like SROs, if they may not be on campus, but still having like an SRO that is designated to your campus that is able to come onto your campus if there is like a problem.
Yeah, so one, thank you for your comment. Two, schools won't be with, it's not like we're saying we're not going to work with the police. There are certain things that we can't, that we cannot not report to the police, i.e., drugs, weapon harassment, and different things that we have to utilize law enforcement for. SROs will be officially phased out at the end of this school year. It's not saying that cops are the problem. It's just saying that we want to invest in more mental health supports instead of over policing our schools. And so your board made a unanimous decision to remove SROs at the end of the school year, with the data that was presented to us that it was best for us to move forward and to be able to embark on a new era. And then when we talk about, I know some folks fear school shootings, and those are always on our mind. And I'll be very candid. I actually know a lot of the survivors from the Parkland massacre shooting. That out of that came the March for Our Lives movement. And most of those students, when I reached out to them and asked them for their opinion before pushing this resolution forward, they said, take the cops out of schools, because their SRO did not respond to the massacre that was going on at their building, and that they had one, and they still had 17 kids still die. And so there are situations where folks are like, we're not seeing the reason why SROs were implemented were to curb massacres on school campuses after Columbine. And there have been several instances where that may have not been followed through all the way. And then also, not every school in DPS has an SRO. And so we know how to adequately do safety without having police officers present in the building. And we know how to keep our kids safe, because you'll still have campus safety officers. You'll still have restorative practice coordinators and deans, etc. It's just saying that instead of our schools being a physical location for police officers, we're going to work with the city to create an SRO division where this SROs that we currently have on the force are still able to respond to schools when needed. However, we want to make sure that we are creating an environment that we no longer need to rely on the police to keep our community safe, where we can have the tools in our own toolbox in order to keep community safe. And then when needed, we will reach out to Denver police.
Thank you for that question, Tyrone, and thank you, Tay, for answering that. We have time for one more question from a student. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, Tay Anderson, you mentioned more mental health supports. What would those look like? I know, just in my experience at my school counselors are kind of unresponsive just because they're really busy.
Yeah, so we're prioritizing the 17 campuses that are losing their SROs with the supports that we are offering to schools, whether that's, do you want to bring in another counselor or a mental health worker or restorative practices, or like, so how we can support. So it's going to be up to individual schools to select what type of services they would like to supplement that funding with. However, we are going to try to work to make sure that schools do have a faster response time with our mental health workers, etc. However, there are certain things that we were calling law enforcement on, and I'm a former restorative practice coordinator, so I had to do this with my day job before I got onto the Denver Public Schools Board of Education. Is there are certain things where we're calling law enforcement for that technically is a mental health issue and not a police officer issue. And so it's not only wasting our time, it's also wasting their time. And so we really need to be getting the professionals in those different fields in the room to be able to address these issues. And so we're going to really be working with the 17 schools that are impacted first to see what supports they need. And then after that, we'll start addressing this on a full wide area. I think that's what we have language in our bond, and Susanna or Carrie can correct me if I'm wrong, but we have language in our bond or in our mill, excuse me, our mill levy, which is going to help provide more nurses to schools. That was another issue that folks were saying, like, we don't have full-time nurses. Why do we have police? And so we are putting stuff in our mill levy to support the social emotional well-being of students and our teachers.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for the question, Tyrone. Thank you for adding to it, Teva. We have about 4 more minutes, so I want to open it up to our adult partners and see if you all have any questions that you have of our students prior to wrapping it up.
I don't have a question. I'd just like to say thank you so much. I've taken, I think, 4 pages of notes tonight just on things I want to keep in the back of my mind as we go through and we make these decisions. And I saw Susanna and Tay doing the same thing. So thank you so much for just your honesty and just your thoughtfulness and telling us things that you want us to know. And I would invite you, I'll put my email here in the chat and my phone number. If there's ever anything you want me to know, please just feel free to reach out. And I do have a hard stop at 8, so I apologize if I jump off before the meeting actually ends. But just a huge thank you to all of you here tonight. Thank you, Magnolia, as always, for getting things organized, and Jordan. And Elise, our fabulous sign language interpreter, who's always here donating her time. She donates time on Facebook Fridays from 4 to 5:30 every Friday. Susanna and I do a Facebook Live where we take questions and answers. You're always welcome to join in there. And I'd just like to also thank our superintendent, because she's just done an amazing job through all of this. So thank you, Susanna.
Yeah, this was great, Magnolia. We should think about just like a regular cadence to do this. It's really, really helpful. And I know attendance might be larger or smaller, but it's always great to be able to hear what the actual experience is like. You've been very generous with your feedback. And so it was really great. I've very much appreciated it.
Thank you. Awesome. Okay. Well, I think I do want to encourage everyone, especially students, if you all still have questions or things that you want to ask, one, reach out. Carrie put her information down there, as well as Susanna in the chat. But I also encourage that if you guys want to email us at Student Voice and Leadership via even Messenger on Facebook, or whether it is through Schoology, please put in your questions, and we'll also make sure that those always get to the folks that it needs to get to, so that you get your response. Great. So again, just like Carrie, I want to appreciate and thank every single one that made it tonight. 2 hours of amazing conversation. I really hope that this helped us all move to create a virtual learning experience that is better for our students across the district. And I'm also excited to see how it is that we can move towards gradual in-person learning that is beneficial for all of us. Thank you to everyone that shared their expertise and their knowledge, and especially thank you to the interpreter for taking her time to be here and helping us make sure that this is accessible. And also I want to thank Jordan for helping with all the planning on the back end to ensure that this happened. And I agree, definitely, like our superintendent mentioned, wanting to make this a regular occurrence. So hopefully in the future we'll see more and more students, and maybe even students joining us. Great. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you so much. We'll
Thank
see you
you.
later. Bye.
Thank
Guys.
you.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Wear
Thank
your
you.
mask, wash your hands, don't hug your friends. Sorry, just had to say that. Bye.
It's important. Great.